Well, Pete, let's start with the inner solar system as we usually do, and the planet Mercury, which is a very well-placed evening object this month.
Yes, it is indeed.
And in fact, at the beginning of April, Mercury is very bright by Mercury's standards. It's around magnitude minus 1.1, but it does start to dim thereafter quite rapidly. And in fact, by the 11th of April, it's just down to magnitude plus zero point 0.2. It reaches greatest evening altitude at sunset. And on this date, on the 11th of April, it'll set just over 2 hours after the sun, which is good news if you're planning to observe it, because it'll be around for a while in a darkening sky.
That's quite good, isn't it?
It
2
is.
hours.
It is.
It's amazing.
It's a lot.
Yeah. On the 21st of April, Mercury's dimming will have reduced it to a much trickier mag plus 2.3, but it should still be possible to see it as long as you allow the evening twilight sky to darken sufficiently. A slender 3% waxing crescent moon sits 6.4 degrees to the west of Mercury on this date. The dim planet Uranus will be there as well, separated from Mercury by 3.8 degrees, but that's going to be really tricky to see against the bright twilight sky. Mercury thereafter closes in on the Sun fairly rapidly, and it's lost from view at the end of April.
Yeah.
Inferior conjunction occurs on the 1st of May, doesn't it?
It does. And if you look through a telescope at Mercury, you will see the planet's phase at the start of the month, actually, 1st of April. It's very, very small, just 5 arc seconds across and 77% gibbous disk, so that's quite tough to see. But as the month progresses, we get closer to Mercury, so its apparent size will increase and its phase will decrease. So on the 15th of April, Mercury will be about 8 arc seconds across and with a phase of 26%, so just over a quarter. So that'll be quite a nice thing to follow. It's quite difficult to see markings on Mercury.
Yes,
you do
it
need
is.
good seeing to see that. I've glimpsed them with my 12-inch telescope, but I've never really seen anything. Glimpsed. I just squinted, and I convinced myself I saw something.
I have actually imaged them, but I think
That's not the same thing. It's not difficult to image detail on
How
Mercury.
very dare you? It's incredibly difficult to image detail. Yeah, again, you've got to have very good seeing, and it probably helps doing it when it's got a higher altitude, so during the day. So the greatest elongation this month will mean that that's the best time to try for it, really.
It is. And moving out then, the object that's really dominating our evening skies at the moment is, of course, the planet Venus.
Oh, yes.
It's really very, very bright. It heads towards greatest eastern elongation on the 4th of June. That means it's at its furthest point from the sun on this date. And on the 10th of April, it's magnitude minus 3.9, and it's just 2.7 degrees south of the star cluster, the open star cluster, the Pleiades, or
That's
M45.
a great scene to try and photograph, actually.
It often ends up being paired with the Pleiades. I think we've seen this a few times. So
yes, when it has a decent evening appearance. Actually, talking about decent evening appearances, it's a good bit of advice with Venus not to get complacent with it.
No.
Because you see it in the evening sky and you think, oh, right, there it is. Yep, I can observe that. Next night, yep, it's still in a really good position, but it will slip out of that position quite rapidly as we head through May and into June.
yeah,
Even though it's got greatest eastern elongation on the 4th of June, its position above the horizon deteriorates rapidly.
it does. Another thing to watch out for on the 4th of June is Venus is at dichotomy. In other words, it's 50% illuminated. However, if you look at Venus through a telescope on the 4th, it won't actually appear to be illuminated. It'll be ever so slightly less. And the reason for that is because of the Schroter effect, and the phase of Venus, the observed phase of Venus, is always less than the predicted phase. So that's a nice thing to watch out for. Start watching out for this end of May, really, and you'll notice that the phase is getting towards 50% before the 4th of June.
So it reaches early, or it reaches 50% earlier in the evening.
That's right.
And later in the morning.
That's right, yeah.
That's basically it. Okay, well, the rapidly expanding spring evening twilight of April takes some of the shine off Venus during the latter part of the month. But as the MAG minus 4.0 planet passes through Taurus at the end of the month, it's joined by a gloriously thin waxing crescent moon on the evenings of the 22nd and 23rd of April. And that's a really popular sight, isn't it? A lot of people like to see that visually, and they also like to try and take photographs of it.
Yeah, it's quite a pretty setup, the moon and Venus together. All right, well, moving out to Mars, still hanging around, isn't it, Mars?
Mars hangs around forever, doesn't it, after its past opposition?
It does. It's in the constellation of Gemini. It's quite faint now. It's shining at magnitude plus 1.0 in the evening sky. It's very small now. It's some 11 arc seconds smaller than it was at the start of December. So, in fact, Mars is now just 6 arc seconds across.
Yeah.
So, if you've got a large telescope, like a 12-inch reflector or a 12-inch aperture-sized telescope, shall we say, you probably still can see some markings on it visually when you've got good seeing. Actually, you can still image details on it.
Yes, you can.
People still image details on Mars down to 4 arc seconds. So we really are getting towards the end of the Mars apparition now. It's almost over.
Yes, it is. Okay, well, Jupiter isn't visible this month because it's in conjunction with the Sun on the 11th of April. And Saturn is in the morning sky, but it's not really very well placed. It's that time of year where they're just sort of not great. So they're going to get better towards the end of the year. Uranus is too low to observe properly as astronomical darkness falls. On the 1st of April, the planet is just 11 degrees above the western horizon as true darkness arrives. But after the first week in April, it's almost at the horizon, so it's sort of not viable anymore.
No, it's a difficult one. And Neptune is a morning object, but it's very, very difficult. So, for all intents and purposes, not visible because it's lost in the dawn twilight.
No, that's right. So, not the best time for planets apart from beautiful Venus and Mercury, of course. So, it's the inner solar system that's ruling the roost at the moment. Okay, so let's now have a look at some of the specials which are occurring during the month of April. And on the 9th, as the sky darkens, Venus will appear south of the Pleiades open cluster, which we've already mentioned, but it's worth repeating that because it is such a dramatic scene. Closest approach is on the evening of the 10th when they appear 2.6 degrees apart. So you've got a few days to repeat that observation. If it's cloudy on a couple of them, you get one view of it, hopefully at least.
Yes. On the 13th, Venus is positioned between the Pleiades and the Hyades open clusters. And on the 18th, Venus is north of the Hyades. With the moon out of the way, this is a great opportunity to grab a photograph of Venus, the Hyades and the Pleiades together. It sounds like an obvious picture. As I understand it, it's actually quite difficult to take because Venus is so bright compared to the stars in the clusters that it's actually quite a tricky job to bring them all out equally.
It's actually quite... Yes, it's a very beautiful scene. It actually reminds me of something I did a number of years ago, which was a bit naughty because we went out with friends and we were at a local hostelry in Selsey, and I knew this conjunction was happening outside and I wanted to take a photograph of it. So I took a bag with me, and then partway through the evening when I thought the sky was dark enough, I just excused myself saying I was going to pop to the loo. And I ran out and ran down to the beach and took the photograph and then got back in time and nobody noticed.
No, that's just the effect you have on a party of people, Pete. Nobody cares.
Nice comeback.
All right. So I have actually seen some nice pictures of the
It's a superb scene
yeah.
to try and photograph because you've got the Pleiades are amazing every time. But the Hyades are a little harder to do justice to because they're so close to us, 150 odd light years, that they appear really spread out in the sky. But of course, you've got the bright star Aldebaran there. But see if you can get a photograph of it. It is a very attractive bit of real estate in the sky, and with Venus there, it should be amazing.
Yes.
So on the 10th of April, then, we've got the 83% waning gibbous moon occulting the MAG plus 2.9 star Al-Nayat, which is Sigma Scorpii. That occurs in the early morning between 0235 to 0330 UT, and the moon will be less than 2 degrees from Antares, that's MAG plus 1.0, which is the alpha star of Scorpio, of course, at that time.
On the 14th, Mars, which will be at magnitude 1.2, sits just 9.5 arc minutes from magnitude 3.0 star Epsilon Geminorum in the evening. So that'd be quite nice to catch.
It will. On the 22nd, we have the waxing crescent moon near the Pleiades in that evening. So the Pleiades is going to get a lot of attention in April. And of course, the 22nd is also the peak night for the April Lyrid meteor shower. And as the waxing crescent moon sets around 2250 UT, this year's peak should be pretty favourable. It's not the most dramatic shower in the world, but it's a nice one to sort of break the long period which has an absence of meteor showers between the quadrantids and the Lyrids.
Okay, and on the 23rd, the Moon and Venus appear quite close at sunset, and they'll be separated by less than 3 degrees. Earlier, at 11:30 UT, they are just 0.7 degrees apart, so that'll be a nice thing to catch in the evening.
That'll be, the 11:30 UT is is daylight, of course.
It
so
is.
That's going to be an interesting thing to try for. You've seen Venus during the day.
I only observe Venus during the day.
I mean, with the naked eye.
Yeah, I can. But it has to be sort of a bit separated from the sun.
Yes.
To see that, but I very often can catch it during the day with just unaided eye. It's I'm sure it's just luck, but once you've seen it, once you see it against the blue sky, you think, how did I ever miss it?
And actually knowing what it looks like makes it easier the next time as well.
It does, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, one trick there is to stand, if you know which side of the sun Venus is on, because at the moment, obviously, it's going to be to the left of the sun, is to stand with the sun blocked behind a building. So you're in the shadow of the building.
Yes.
And then you can look safely towards the region of sky to the left to see whether you can pick it out.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's now head out to the stars. And April is a transition month as far as the sky is concerned. With the onset of the lighter evenings, the dusk twilight is now beginning to envelop the wonderful winter constellations of Orion, the mighty hunter. He disappears quickly, doesn't he?
It really does go at this time of year. The start of the month is just about there, and then all of a sudden you notice Orion's belt is parallel to the western horizon.
But it's because
gone.
the twilight is expanding as well, and it grabs him really quickly. You get the opposite effect in the autumn when you've got the summer constellations, the the summer triangle, I should say. That seems to hang around forever, and that's because as it's drifting slowly to the west, so the twilight is also shrinking at that time of year. But this time of year, it's expanding. So as Orion drifts to the west, so the summer. Well, I'm obsessed with the summer and the winter. So the evening twilight just expands and engulfs him really quickly. So you think, I've got time to observe Orion, and then you haven't.
No, gone very quickly. So conversely to that, in the east later in the night, we can catch a little glimpse of summer with the giant inverted flower pot shape of Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. That's starting to climb in the evening sky. And look to the northeast, and we can see the giant northern cross formed by the wings, tail and neck of the constellation of Cygnus the Swan.
Yes.
And a little to the west of Cygnus is the constellation of Lyra. It kind of looks like a little bit of a squished diamond, but it is marked by the brilliant bluish-white coloured star Vega, once used as a reference point for magnitude brightness.
Yes, it was indeed. Well, if you run a line between the star at the top of the Northern Cross, or the tail of the Swan, which is Deneb, of course, through Vega, and extend it for the same distance again, you locate the famous Keystone asterism in the constellation of Hercules the Strongman. It's not particularly bright, this asterism, but it is quite distinctive in shape. Now, if you locate the two stars that mark the western or right-hand edge of the keystone and look from the top of this line about a third of the way down, if you have dark skies and keen eyesight, you might just be able to make out, it looks a bit like a sort of fuzzy star, and that marks the location of Messier 13, the great globular cluster in Hercules. And that is an incredible object to look at through a telescope.
It is. I've seen it in lots of different size telescopes, 4-inch telescope, my 8-inch telescope, and now my 12-inch telescope. And each time it's just a joy to look at. It is
yeah.
one of those things where, especially when it's dark, If even in the city, you can get dark nights when the moon's out the way and there's not too much haze around to scatter any ambient light. And a good 8-inch telescope will resolve the stars along the outer edge of it,
Yes,
and it really is a magnificent looking object.
But it's sort of, with a big aperture telescope, it has a 3D quality to it, doesn't it?
It does. It's got those dust lanes in the middle of it that become obvious.
Oh, that create the propeller.
Yes, I've never quite seen it looking like a propeller, but it certainly does get that when you've been looking at it long enough, that 3D effect.
It's quite an interesting that, actually, because in photographs, I mean, globular clusters, dare I say it, do have a tendency to look quite similar.
But
that propeller that propeller feature always makes M13 look very distinctive. I can always identify M13 because I can see the propeller.
Yeah, it is quite a lovely little globular cluster, one of my favourites. And of course, once you found the keystone, move your gaze to about midway up, 45 degrees in a southerly direction. And in this direction, you'll find the distinctive constellation of Leo the Lion, who in mythology was killed by Hercules as one of the 12 labours of Hercules.
I like that story because that legend states that the lion had impenetrable skin, and Hercules' task was to kill the lion and return its skin to prove it was dead. In the end, he managed to kill it by sticking his arm down the lion's throat and throttling it from the inside, obviously.
That's really unnecessarily violent.
A lot of legends are, actually. And the task of removing the skin, how is he going to get it off if it's impenetrable? So legend states was accomplished by using the lion's own claws as knives.
Right, okay. Well, I think the most recognisable thing about Leo actually is the sickle asterism at the front, because it does look like a backward question mark punctuated by the brightest star in the constellation Alpha Leonis, also known as Regulus.
Little King, that means.
Little King. The tail of the lion is marked by the star Denebola, when this forms a triangular group with Delta and Theta Leonis, which marks the end of the cat's hind.
Yes, it does. Okay, with Denebola as the point of the tail, or the end of the triangle furthest from the body, the triangle points to a bowl-shaped collection of stars that makes up part of Virgo the Virgin, and that's actually known as the Bowl of Virgo. And the region between Denebola and the two edges of the bowl is called the Realm of Galaxies, because here lies the vast Virgo cluster of galaxies.
Yeah, this is a wonderful region of sky.
It is.
At this time of year, our view is turned toward extragalactic space, so beyond the Milky Way. In the summer, our view is turned towards the centre of the galaxy. So when in springtime like this, we're looking out from the galaxy, we can see a lot of the other ones. And it is remarkable just how many galaxies are accessible with a small to medium-sized telescope in this region of sky. It really is very impressive. I could list, I'm sure we both got our favourites, Pete, but I think M87, this giant elliptical galaxy of magnitude 11, is really quite a popular target.
Yes, it is indeed. I know, I mean, it's a good place to tick off a lot of Messiers, and as I do a lot of the charts for the magazine, of course, it's a nightmare area to try and chart because there are just so many galaxies. But it's really worth, if you've got a telescope of any size, if you point it in this region, to locate some of the galaxies and then galaxy hop to other ones, because there's so many there, and it's a very satisfying thing to do once you find them.
It is. To locate the main Messiers in this region, locate the star that marks the eastern end of the edge of the Virgo Bowl. This is Epsilon Virginis.
Vindemiatrix.
I knew you'd have to say it. Every time we mention this star, you have to get in quick.
It's a great name.
It is. Vindemiatrix. And draw a line between Vindemiatrix and Denebola, and roughly halfway along this line puts you in the middle of the galaxy cluster. And as you say, you should just galaxy hop from one to another. You probably will need to let your eyes dark adapt for about 20 minutes before you can really see anything.
Yes, it is. Well, Virgo is the second largest constellation in the sky, and it sits just to the north of the one that holds the title of being the largest in the entire sky. You know what that one is, Paul.
This, of course, is Hydra, the water snake. It is. It's a huge region containing very little.
That's absolutely right, yes.
But actually, the neck of the water snake heads east under Leo the Lion, where we meet the constellation's brightest star, Alphard, which very, very appropriately translates to the solitary one.
Well, actually, I think wasn't it Hydra where somebody tried to sneak in a couple of constellations. They tried to sneak in the cat, which is Felis.
Oh, really?
And the owl. And I can't remember what the name of the owl was, but they tried to slip these two in with the sort of faint stars which were there, and I think they got rejected eventually.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to see anything meaningful there.
It's a very odd constellation. I think it sort of mops up all the stars which were left over when all the other constellations were put together. But there are two prominent small constellations riding on the back of the water snake. You've got Corvus the Crow and Crater the Cup. And I think Corvus, which is quite small, is quite distinctive because it's bright. It's got a little diamond of stars, which is called the Sail. It's an asterism known as the Sail.
Yeah, they're much more easier to spot than Hydra.
Yeah.
We should mention also that Ursa Major, the Great Bear, is located very close to the zenith at this time of year. And if you follow the arc of the tail of the asterism known as the plough or the saucepan, this marks the bear's rear side, backside, and the tail, you'll come to one of the brightest stars in the northern celestial hemisphere, and that's Arcturus in Boötes the herdsman. I'm not sure why we have to mention the brightest star in the northern celestial hemisphere. But,
well, because
okay.
it's important. It's
important to you and nobody else.
Sirius is the brightest nighttime star in the sky. Arcturus is special to us because it sits above the celestial equator, so it's the brightest star in the northern half of the sky, or brightest nighttime star in the northern half of the sky. Brightest star, of course, is the sun.
Yes, but not very often seen at night, Pete. So Arcturus is actually quite easily recognisable because it does have a beautiful orange colour. It's a red giant star that's come to the end of its life.
Yes,
and it really is quite a pretty sight. I always think when you see Arcturus in the evening sky that summer is on the way.
I always think when I see Arcturus in the evening sky that's the brightest nighttime star in the northern half of the sky. But if you have access,
no, you don't.
But if you have access to a very flat southern horizon and live in the southern half of the country, wait for Spica to pass just to the west of south and look down towards the horizon. Here you are looking just to the south of Hydra's tail, marked by the Mag plus 3.3 star Pi Hydrae. Now, although they may appear faint and dim by the thick atmosphere close to the horizon, see if you can pick out 4 roughly equal brightness stars in a distorted diamond shape. It's quite hard. I've tried to do this. This is by no means an easy feat, but if you can do it, you've just managed to see the northernmost reaches of the southern hemisphere constellation of Centaurus, the Centaur.
That is quite a tough ask. I think we have done it at Selsey Beach, actually. I remember us.
We have.
But I think we did it by accident because you said, oh, look, over there's the stars of Centaur. It's quite remarkable, actually, that you can see that far south, but you do need a very clear horizon.
Yes, you do.
And one that isn't got too much light pollution there.
Okay. Well, as we have winter to the west, summer to the east, and spring well and truly centred to the south, autumn gets the worst deal, located very low in the north. Now, if you take a look in that direction, the distinctive constellation of Cassiopeia, the seated queen, can be seen hovering about 20 degrees up over the northern horizon. Now, that constellation is well known to UK sky watchers, of course, because they often refer to it as the W constellation, the W asterism there. But at this time of year, when it's really low down, it is the right way up because it goes round the pole star, of course, or round the North Celestial Pole, to be more precise. Its orientation can change over time, but at this time of year, it actually looks like a W.
Yes, as opposed to a sigma or an M.
Yes.
So, yes, and quite a distinctive constellation. Well, Pete, plenty to see in the evening and night sky in April. We wish everybody clear skies.
Absolutely.
And hope you get to see some of these events we've been talking about. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Paul.